I have with me Austin Theriault, the 2017 ARCA Racing Series champion who currently competes part-time in the NASCAR Truck Series in the On Point Motorsports Toyota Tundra. Austin, thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks. It's good to be with you tonight. I'm glad to spend some time with you.
I really appreciate it. Now, first off, Austin, what got you into racing?
Well, that's a long answer, and I'll try to be as brief as possible because I feel like I had a much different career path than a lot of other cup drivers, especially cup drivers or other drivers that have come through the sport. I grew up in a rural part of the state of Maine, so there wasn't a lot of racetracks to basically race at as a kid. And so I spent my 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, I spent the time as through those years basically just doing the regular stuff that kids do. And I was still an avid NASCAR fan, but I didn't really realize there was an outlet. You know, I didn't realize there was a way for me to compete or even to be a race car driver. So it all happened by chance. The summer of 2007, the local short track, 45 minutes from where I grew up, the kid opened up, and so my grandfather bought me like a $500 of junk car, I guess. But it had a roll cage, and it was still really fun. And I actually remember fondly and almost like it was yesterday, my first time on the racetrack ever. Suiting up, putting my helmet on, putting seat belts, and talking to the competitors before I even hit the racetrack, realizing how serious they took racing. And it started as a hobby, and man, it's grown from there. I raced locally for a couple years, and then moved up to race the regional in the some different late model tours that were racing, including in New Hampshire, Maine, some in Canada, Vermont, northern parts of New York, and so I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then I finally made the move to racing in the South, spending a lot of time in North Carolina with some different teams, and that took me all the way through till about 18, 19 years old, and that's when I finally first started breaking into the upper levels like ARCA and NASCAR, and it's been a fun ride since then. And people that know me now probably are more familiar with my history and my stats dating back from 2014, 15, 16, and 17, finally with the ARCA Championship, but started all the way back in 2007 and later than most. But I will tell you, and it's obvious, some of these kids start at 7, 8, 9, racing go-karts, and I don't really consider that necessarily a disadvantage, but I had to learn more in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting, and that you look at a lot of these drivers, like you said, not just in NASCAR, but you look at people who they have their goals maybe more towards open wheel racing, like IndyCar, Formula One, and whatnot. They start off about 7, 8 years old in go-karts, trying to eventually get into the lower level developmental series, and hoping they'll get picked up.
Yeah, it's every racer's dream, I think, to get whatever level they want to go, whether it's IndyCar, NASCAR, from a worldwide standpoint, international standpoint, Formula One. So it's a dream. Some people want to grow up and be doctors and save the world, find a cure for cancer. Others are more content, sort of in other jobs. But every once in a while, you'll find somebody that wants to be a race car driver.
Yeah, racing drivers, they can be an interesting breed.
They certainly can.
Yeah, I got into racing when, basically my father, he was really into it, and his father before him, and like they went to the Indianapolis 500 for basically every year since I believe 1974, and I first went in 2004, and I guess that's just what got me into racing. And I mean, since then I've started following other types of racing like NASCAR, Formula One, MotoGP, and this year started to watch IMSA racing more regularly.
It's funny you mentioned that. I felt like I was on a similar track to you, like sort of being the regular race fan. But you're more than a regular race fan. You keep track a lot more than most. But spending time as a kid with my grandparents at Loudon International Speedway in New Hampshire, they had a couple NASCAR races there every single year, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid, even before I started racing. So, it definitely could have gone I could have gone on a different path if I wouldn't have been, if my grandfather wouldn't have bought me that race car at 13. I'd be doing something completely different and still attending NASCAR races as a fan.
Yeah. Now, what do you consider to be your most memorable moment in racing, whether it involved you or not?
Well, different moments come and go, and if you would have asked me this 2 years ago, I think my answer would have been different. Looking back at our season in 2017, I'm sure we'll talk about it, a decent amount tonight, but I think standing back after we had won the championship, and watching everybody else, watching my whole team on stage, handing around the championship trophy was a pretty amazing moment. Keep in mind that we didn't get to celebrate in the traditional way as champions, because usually the cars come off the racetrack at the last race, and the champion is crowned, pulls their car into the championship celebration, the part that they have for the championship celebration, and it's almost like a victory celebration. But that night, we happened to have our worst performance of the year. We had a flat tire going into one of the corners, so we had to wheel out our backup car for our championship celebration. It's something that if you weren't watching the race, you wouldn't have known, but we took all those pictures with the backup car, pretended like we had just come off the racetrack and won the championship. But it's still amazing to just look back and watch them holding the trophy, and then the fact that they felt good about what we all accomplished together as a team.
It certainly was impressive. Now last year you drove for Ken Schrader. Now, the reason I bring that up is he was my father's favorite NASCAR driver.
Yes, sir, I did, and it was an amazing time. Ken Schrader, I feel like, is known in the garage, meaning throughout the different drivers and the people that work in racing, as one of the most humble, down-to-earth race car drivers there is. And even the fans, the fans that get the opportunity to meet him when he's not racing, or has his helmet on, getting ready to jump in the race car, he'll really spend time, talk to you, down to earth, and I don't know. It's in a certain respect, I feel like that generation is going away in racing. You have a different generation coming into play, and Kenny's part of that old school. He'll just jump in the race car. He just wants to go fast, and he'll jump in about anything. He'll jump in a street stock. He'll jump in any sort of dirt car, a late model, ARCA car, anything that has a steering wheel. He'll jump in. So it was good to spend all that time with him last year and learn from one of the best.
Yeah, I'll admit I haven't had the opportunity to meet Ken Schrader, but basically everything I've heard about him is that he's a very nice person.
Yeah, absolutely, right there, right on the mark. Him and his wife. His wife runs the business, I think, on a day-to-day basis. when Kenny's at the racetrack, and she keeps things in order, but she's very, very nice as well.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I know that I know at least through the late 2000s he was running like close to about 100 races a year or so. I don't know how much what his total per year is now at this point.
It's a little bit less than that, but he's racing. He's racing more than I am. He's racing more than I ever did, even now at his age, which is still young. He's still got plenty of years ahead of him.
He's certainly young at heart. Now, who would you consider to be major influences on your career?
Well, just briefly, a little while ago, I was kind of filling you in on some of my history before I started racing, before I was behind the wheel. Mark Martin was my favorite NASCAR driver, and I guess he influenced me in a few different ways. He was always a gentleman on and off the racetrack. He was respected in the garage area for how he raced people, and he was aggressive if he needed to be, but sometimes he had a way of racing smart and being around when it really counted. So, if you could pair the fact that he was my favorite driver, but you also asked me who influenced me, well, I think he influenced me because he was my favorite driver, and it was all around the same time when I started racing. I was still following. He was still racing, and he had a couple, several good years of racing left after 2007. And even though he switched teams and whatnot, I followed him all the time. I used to come home from school. I don't recommend anybody do this, but if I got all my work finished, I would try to leave school early, or I'd tell my mother to call me out of school a couple hours early. Like if the race got delayed until Monday, I'd skip a couple hours of school just to watch him race.
Yeah. Now, if there was one thing you could change about NASCAR, what would it be?
Well, without getting too, political but answering as well as I can, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but I think, a lot of racers, whether you're racing at Hickory Motor Speedway in a late model or top level Cup Series, we realize that over the years, racing's kind of gotten a bit more expensive from the standpoint of all the costs that it takes to be successful and to finish good. Tires, engines, chassis, bodies, and I know there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes to just make it possible so that there's more teams. The teams are healthier. They don't have to depend as much on sponsorship. But I think it's still work that has to be done, and just focusing on the fact that do we need to have carbon fiber panels in certain areas of the car, and I'm talking more geared towards some of the NASCAR stuff from the outside, not knowing all of the reasons behind it. It's just fans come up to me and they realize what's going on, but the fans don't know that there's a carbon fiber piece, or the hood or the tail or the bumpers made out of carbon fiber. The fan sitting in the grandstand doesn't realize that. But sometimes I think we just add unnecessary costs, and it's not a simple fix. But I think if we all work together, we can make racing better.
All right then. Now I would say that one thing that, whether some might say it's good or bad, it's their opinion, but I would say that if you start to run into scenarios where sponsors may pay less for one reason or another to sponsor a team, that might bring the costs down naturally, really.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking specifically, but before the costs come down, you're saying if the teams or if the sponsors pay less, then that'll automatically sort of bring the budgets down.
Well, what I mean is just kind of gradually, if a team realizes they can't quite bring in as much from from a sponsor or what have you, they may have to cut some costs.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that, and we've seen that for several years. You know, it's just teams realize that everybody's got to work together, and the tough part comes in where everybody wants to try to find that little edge, you know, to be half a tenth quicker. So as a team, you might have to spend the money to try to find that extra speed, but that brings the cost up for everybody, because then the next team has to buy that part or has to get that trick figured out, and it costs money to do that. So it's sometimes, and I'm not the only one to ever say this, but the teams can be their worst enemy, just because we all seem to bring up the cost. And the fact that, just like you said, if sponsors are starting to pay less, that's automatically going to make teams really, really focus on what they're spending their money on. And in the long run, that will bring costs down. But I think we can do more on our ends, whether it's the racers or the competitors or the series, and the teams to be accountable for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the least beneficial way to lower costs for NASCAR teams would be for sponsors to pay less. And the only point I was more making is just that it might be something that while it is a bad thing, it'll do the trick, and hopefully, like you said though, about with regards to teams trying to find an edge, that might price some teams out, but I suppose racing hasn't necessarily been a cheap game.
Yeah, that's something going into it. I mean, people need to realize that it's very fun, but sometimes it can really get out of hand with budgets and whatnot. And I'm not saying that a budget cap would work. I've heard people talk about budget caps. I really don't know how you can realistically police any sort of budget caps, but we see that happening in other sports. Whether or not that's ever going to happen in NASCAR or in motorsports in general, I just don't see how you can police it. It's very tough.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like you said, like I was saying about how racing is fairly expensive. I don't know if you saw when BK Racing was having their issues, how it basically came out that the team was about $44 million in debt after their, I believe this was their 7th season in operation. And to me, I just kind of find that almost crazy that a team like that, considering their, frankly speaking, lack of results, put that much, at least that much into it.
Yeah, I mean, just doing the math, I have a calculator out here. I mean, if you went, you said how much? 44 million. So 44 divided by 7, that's over $6 million a year, right? So that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very, relatively speaking, low budget team that, like I said, it just didn't really perform. I mean, you probably look at what your Hendricks, Gibbs, Penske, what they're putting in to be at the level they are, probably would at least be double, maybe 3 times that.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'm sure it's different when you get up the ladder and talking about some of the top tier teams.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I might honestly have just lowballed that. Really, I mean, like I was saying like it could be double or triple that, so that'd be what, $12-18 million. Yeah, I gotta believe that's fairly realistic, but as soon as I say that, I'll look it up, and it turns out it's even more. Now, the other day at Martinsville had certainly an interesting finish between Martin Truex Jr. and Joey Logano, and certainly people had their opinions of it. What was yours?
I think Martin could have raced him harder, and I'm not. It's hard because I don't know what I would have done if I was behind the wheel. The way I look at it is, Martin gave him room. depending on which different TV angle you saw, it looked like Martin did kind of run him wide just a couple times, but generally raced him pretty clean. The only other unfortunate thing, depending on how, what your viewpoint is, whether you like it or not, it comes down to that last race. So you almost got to try to get yourself locked in. I mean, what Joey did, in my opinion, was probably necessary to some extent to his team and to his sponsors. Whether or not somebody can agree with it, or you don't have to agree with something to think that to think that Joey, it made sense for Joey to do it. I think there's two different things. We all realize what's up on the line, and Joey took it. And I guess now it's up to Martin to decide if he's going to race Joey like that again, or if it comes down to the last race, is he going to give Joey less room? That's something that they're going to have to settle. It's easy for us to look on the outside, and there's probably 50% of the fans that say Martin was wrong. There's 50% of the fans that say that Joey did right, and the stakes are so high right now. We're late in the season. You got to get yourself locked into the top four, and now Joey has a chance to run for a championship, and we'll see if Martin can get himself locked in too. If he doesn't, maybe Martin will look back at this race and say, man, maybe I should have wrecked him.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it all plays out. Not long before I started doing this tonight, I saw an article published on ESPN.com where Truex basically said that he isn't going to change his driving style for over these next two, potentially three races. I mean, 2 races to get to potentially be eligible for the championship. And now, whether he's just saying that and he'll do something different when Logano's near him, we'll see. I'm sure Truex over these next 2 races will make his goal to either win the race or at least have enough points to make it in there. Of course, if he doesn't, and Logano's already locked in, I guess we'll see how Truex decides to race him at Homestead.
Wouldn't that be quite a thing if it comes down to, the last laps of Homestead and it's Joey and Martin racing for the win or the championship, or even if they're racing for 10th, and let's say the other 2 guys are wrecked or something, it could be really interesting. Maybe the consequences of Martinsville will come out when they're racing for a championship at Homestead between the 2 of them.
Yeah, I mean, no matter your opinion of it, it is a bit ironic that Logano, that this finish happened at Martinsville, where, as we saw back in 2015, Logano got what some people perceived as his just desserts from Matt Kenseth.
Yeah, and some drivers will, are not going to take as much roughhousing, if that's what you want to call it. They're not going to take you driving them rough, and they're going to retaliate. So we'll see what Martin does. Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, I guess personally, my stance on the finish was that, I mean, it's not the first time somebody has moved a person out of the way in this case, or even wrecked the person who was either racing the leader or was the leader. I mean, you look at how the Daytona 500 finished this year. So from that regard, I wouldn't say Logano did anything wrong, but I would also say that since Logano has shown he's willing to win a race like that, or race somebody to go for the championship like that, he has to accept that somebody may race him back that way.
Exactly, and there's always consequences for actions. It's not just racing; it's any sport, and business or anything. There's always consequences. If you take advantage of somebody, you got to be ready to pay the consequences. Now, and we know NASCAR, especially compared to some of the more gentleman types of racing, has a long history of it being rough. And if you look back at some of the Earnhardt tapes and the Earnhardt videos, some of those guys weren't afraid to rough each other up, and especially when it came down to the win or top 5. I mean, I'll give you one chance. Maybe I'll give you another chance, but if you come down on me again, I'm gonna wreck you, or I'm gonna hit you out of the way. And so, to a certain extent, I think NASCAR has gotten a lot of publicity, even back, when it first hit television. I mean, one of the first races, it came down to guys racing hard for the win, and look where it got us as a sport. I mean, it got us a lot of publicity, and a lot of people finally started watching, and it exploded as a sport.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, for whether you like it or not, it is a tradition.
It is, and sometimes traditions change, and sometimes they stay the same. And NASCAR is sort of in the middle right now. It's got a lot of things the same, but every year it seems like it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Now, in your debut with On Point Motorsports, you finished 8th at Las Vegas. How much are you in the future plans of the team, or any team for that matter?
Well, I mean, I really enjoy working with those guys at On Point. Bones, Brett, all the guys in the shop. They actually have they don't have a huge team right now because they're just starting. So anybody from the outside would have looked and said, hey, they're starting. I'm sure they just want to get a top 20 finish, but we had better expectations than that. So when we went into Vegas, we struggled a little bit in practice and qualifying, but I felt confident and comfortable. We were getting better every single run, faster. Even in the race, we made good changes, and so my future with On Point, I think, could potentially be a really good one. As we know, we spent probably 5-10 minutes at the beginning of the show talking about sponsorship, and the fact is that On Point, like any other team, needs a budget and needs sponsorship to be able to pay their bills, and so right now it's just there's a lot of conversations going on, and the fact is, we'd all love to work together again. We'd love to go to more races this year, and love to do as many races as possible next year. And so a lot of it's coming down to sponsorship right now, and we'll see what we can do. Sponsorship is a never-ending search. It continues, and they're looking hard for sponsors that want to be a part of the team, and we'll see what we can do. There's certainly no guarantees in racing. I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs. I felt like I've been on top of the world sometimes, going into a season, knowing that you got 20 races to prove yourself, and in 2017 I won the championship. And then I've also been on the other end of things where it just seems like you don't know what you got planned, you don't know what's happening next. So I don't know. I have a lot of respect for anybody that's in a sport or in a business where you don't really know what you got around the next corner. That makes you want to dig harder. It makes you want to work harder. And sometimes they say when you work hard, that's when the results come. I think it's about working smart and just some of it's luck. I don't know. I don't exactly know what luck is, but it happens sometimes. Right place at the right time, meeting the right people. You never know who you're going to meet, and they could turn into a organization or a business that will support you for the next 5 years in your career, and you can partner together and grow together. So that's a long answer to your question. I hope I kind of talked about what On Point did for me, but by the opportunity they gave me at Vegas, and hopefully it opens more doors.
Yeah, I'd say it was a fine answer, and I certainly hope things work out for you with them, or if not with them, another team.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Now, have you considered trying out any other racing series?
That's a good question. I mean, there's some drivers out there that are so diverse they could could probably race anything. I've set my sights on stock car racing, on NASCAR. It's what I know best, and it's what I think I'm really good at. You never want to rule out anything. I feel like I'm pretty decent at road courses. Got a win last year in the ARCA Series, and I've raced some other road course races. But yeah, it's mainly a focus on stock car racing, and until somebody wants to give me the opportunity to just race, or race a different series, and they say go out there and I don't care if you tear up the cars, just learn how to drive it. I'm sure it'll take me a couple seasons, but I think I can learn about anything.
Well, it's good to hear. Now, like you look at drivers back basically in the 1960s, 1970s, how they raced such a variety of different racing series, and I would say to a certain degree you're starting to see that a bit again these days. You look at people in NASCAR like Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, who came from a background in dirt track racing, and they still regularly race on those in those types of races. Same. Also, Chase Briscoe is a pretty good example of somebody like that.
Yeah, and kind of to add a little bit more, if I could, I definitely have a passion for late model racing. It's where I came up from, and I think you see a lot of these guys like Larson and Briscoe, like you just mentioned. Anytime they have the opportunity, they go back and race late models, and I certainly would. It's just right now from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense. But I love racing late models, and especially super late models. Have a lot of experience with that, and even love working on them. I like turning wrenches on those particular cars because I spent so much time as a kid working on them and driving them. It taught me a lot about racing. Understanding the cars, I think, somewhat, not too much. I think a lot of times you get potentially drivers that come in there and they try to be their own crew chief. And when you get to the next levels of the sport, that's very, very, very hard because, you basically want to turn all that responsibility over to the crew chief. But when you get, like, I don't know if you're familiar with some of the late model guys that have come up through, like Bubba Pollard, he still races late models. He's that type of guy that has so much experience, he could probably call the shots from inside the race car, when to pit, what changes to make. It's guys like that really impress me, to be honest, just because they understand so much. So I'm definitely passionate about the lower levels, the lower ranks of racing, where people come from. I think a lot of times we definitely focus a lot on NASCAR, and it's important, but we can't forget the grassroots level of racing because there's so much talent there, and many people never get the chance to race at the higher levels of the sport. And given the right amount of time and opportunity, there's some guys that are racing at local short tracks that I believe would be just as good or sometimes better than some of the guys that are racing in trucks, ARCA, Xfinity right now.
Yeah, as long as perhaps if they catch the right breaks, there'll be names that will be seen in victory lane commonly in NASCAR. Now, I have some questions that were submitted to me via Twitter. Now, 2014 ARCA champion Mason Mitchell asked, I would like to know what drives him to continue each day. Also, who is the most influential person he follows, no family or racing related?
I think Mason, hopefully Mason's listening to this because he knows he's putting me on the spot. Mason's a friend of mine, and sometimes from time to time we talk about the things that make us get up every morning and continue to pursue our passion. I think that's different for everybody. I certainly like a challenge. I like seeing progress being made. Like when I go to bed at night, as long as I have something to aim for, to challenge myself or to feel like, whether it's myself, am I getting better at something, or or am I working with a group of people or an organization that's getting better? Yeah, I like seeing people grow, and being better both personally and professionally. It's exciting for me, and it really motivates me. As far as he said, his next question was, pick a person that you feel like is influential in your life outside of racing or sports
or family.
Yeah, or family. No, Mason Mitchell really inspires me. No, all kidding aside, there's a gentleman that I feel like is gaining more fans. I hate to use the word fans because his work, I think, is more about inspiring people. Guy's name is Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a business guy, entrepreneur. I think based in New York City. His background, he's actually not. He wasn't born in the United States. He came from a different country as a kid, and built himself a business. But I like some of the content he puts out just because it could apply to anybody. It could apply to somebody that's 65 years old, or it could apply to a 10-year-old kid that is 10 or 10 to 18-year-old kid that doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life. He or she wants to do with their life. Just a lot of motivation, a lot of practical things that he puts out, and I always look forward to the new content that he puts out every week.
All right then. I'll admit I hadn't heard of him, but might be somebody I could look up.
Yeah, definitely. He's got a lot of followers on Instagram, social media, and whatnot.
All right then. Now, Kamikaze Games asks, what was the journey through that magical 2017 ARCA season like?
Looking back at the first time that me and Kenny met, I sat down in his office, I think, end of 2016. Beginning of 2017, let's just say January. By no means did we think we were going to win 7 races. We knew that we could be successful, and I was just beginning to learn the guys' names on the crew. What they liked, what they didn't like. We were all really we were learning to gel and mold together as a team. And from that first till the end of the race, I felt like we really, really, really grew as an organization. Like, not only did the cars get better because we really focused on that, but I thought as a team, like the whole process that we put throughout the year on like what we expected out of ourselves and how we expected each other to treat each other on the team was important, because when you're going for championship seasons or even when you're racing full time, I mean, there was a lot of situations or a lot of instances where we'd spend weeks together, days together, more than we'd spend with our families or with more than spending time with friends. So like, you really have to be comfortable with each other to be successful in any sport or any business, whatever. Whenever you're working with a team, you spend a lot of time together. So I don't know. I just thought that we grew all throughout that year, and I had to overcome some obstacles. When you're together for what feels like a week at a time, sometimes people get on each other's nerves, but the good thing is that we overcame that. And that's the down and dirty that sometimes people won't tell you. A lot of times people from the outside will say, "Oh, things are perfect," and tell me an instance in life that things are perfect. Things don't always go perfect, but the fact that everybody's still so close, I think is a testament to that realization that we just worked through our struggles and got better race after race after race.
That's good to hear. Now, this is my own question. You won in your first race with the team at Daytona. I mean, first off, what was it like to win in your first race with the team, let alone at a place like Daytona?
Well, looking back Daytona I had a sort of a asterisk on Daytona all the way back from 2015 because me and Tyler Reddick worked together in the Truck Series race to help him win, and I ended up finishing third or fourth in that. I think fourth in that race. So I don't know. I felt like I definitely didn't deserve to win, but I felt like I wanted to have as many chances as possible to win Daytona, and I led a bunch of laps in the truck race there in 2016. So I felt like, hey, you know what? We've come close. Why can't we come close in 2017? And by God, we did. So it was a cool experience. There aren't many people that wave the checker flag at Daytona International Speedway in Victory Lane, and we got to do it. And first race out with the team was pretty amazing. It was a really emotional for a couple guys on the team. It's actually Donnie Richardson's. I don't know. Was it? I'm trying to think. First time winning Daytona, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's why he was really emotional. He was the crew chief on the team. His first time winning a race at Daytona, and it set off our season. It really gave us a lot of positive momentum heading into the next races.
Well, it certainly all worked out for you.
It did.
Neil Bailey asks, are you encouraged to see people like Ryan Preece and Daniel Hemrick getting rides based on talent and not money or sponsorship?
It's encouraging, and I'm looking forward to the fact that things are getting better. There was a time where people would say, "Oh, if you don't have the sponsorship, you can't make it in racing, or if you can't make it in NASCAR." That's definitely still a struggle for a lot of people, and I find myself still struggling with sponsorship from time to time. And actually, in this scenario that I'm in right now, as a good example, but the fact that there are still those opportunities that come up to me proves that you can't give up, and it's certainly a struggle. I think to position yourself as somebody that can fill a spot in the highest level of stock car racing, which is the Cup Series. But the fact that those opportunities come up from time to time, and it seems like there's more news every single day that comes by. Was it maybe a month ago? There was a bunch of announcements. So that's all positive. It's really positive for the sport.
I agree. I mean, in each case, they're getting pretty good cars. Hemrick, of course, will be driving for Richard Childress Racing and is replacing Ryan Newman at that team, while Ryan Preece, he's replacing AJ Allmendinger at JTG Doherty Racing. Of course, next year, they're going to be using engines from Hendrick Motorsports, and, I mean, certainly see how much that affects their performance.
Yes, and same thing with the 90. Some changes with the 95 car, which it's good to see. It's good to see people moving up into more competitive cars. I think that's also important to look at. You had drivers that paid their dues over the years, running in good equipment. I have a lot of respect for the teams that finish 35th, because it's just as hard to make that happen. To raise, raising $3 million to run 35th, I think is just as amazing as the top levels of the sport. So those drivers paid their dues, and now they're seeing opportunities to work with some better teams, and hopefully they're successful.
Yeah, hopefully things work out for people like Preece, Hemrick, and also you mentioned Matt DiBenedetto. Austin Taylor asks if you will be at Spud Racing, or Austin Taylor asks if you will be at Spud Speedway next year.
Well, I mean, anybody that knows me from Maine, racing in Maine, realizes that that's where I came from. So, have a lot to give back to that particular track, and unfortunately, the past couple of years, it's been basically closed again. So it started back in 07 again. Started racing again in 07, and it's sort of been on and off since then. And but the fact the guy that runs it now, Troy Haney, really put some effort and time and money into it, and there was a race up there this year in July. I think it was July, maybe it was June, but it was in the summer months, and I had a blast up there. Had a competitive car. We really struggled with mechanical issues all night and didn't get the finish we wanted. But I'd love to go back there and just spend time with the fans. I visited with a lot of people that first got me into racing. They were giving me advice my first laps at the track, and it was cool to see all of them again. So short answer is, who knows? Maybe you'll see me again there, depending on what sort of racing is going on there next year. But if it's not next year, it'll probably be in the years to come.
Well, if you go back there, I'm sure the fans up in Maine will be glad to see you.
I'll be glad to see them too.
Zachary Hill asks, what was it like in the recovery process after the crash at Las Vegas in 2015? What do you remember from the incident?
I certainly remember most of the incident. Some of the most challenging parts of my career, and you don't want to overstate the fact that racing's dangerous. Racing's a dangerous sport, and the safety advancements have come so far. I think we forget it from time to time. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. The helmets are safer, the cars are safer, the tracks are safer, the safety protocols are safer for the medical workers. I mean, everybody really took a deep look at safety back when Earnhardt died in 2001, and I think I'm a recipient of that. So I guess what I'm saying is, if things wouldn't have been taken as seriously leading up to my crash, maybe I wouldn't be here, or maybe the injuries would be worse. Worst case scenario thinking, which I never want to do, because you always want to stay positive. But who knows? And I'm thankful that I'm still here and able to tell the story, and thankful for all the people that helped me through that whole process of healing and physical therapy. I mean, it was several months. And even after several months, I mean, there's all that residual effect that your body takes time to heal. And I just think it was a point in life where I was able to learn a lot of lessons. One of them was the fact that we came back in 2017 and won the championship. Looking back, that kind of shows me that perseverance is important. So maybe somebody else might have hung your helmet up and said, maybe this is a sign to stop racing. There wasn't really any time that I thought of that, and I'm so grateful that I didn't really doubt my ability after that either. I didn't doubt that it wasn't possible to be successful again. I credit that to the people around me, just the fact that I was brought up by a family that taught me all those values, and I had people around me that continue to encourage me to keep working and just to overcome those obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, certainly something that most people should be able to agree on in NASCAR is that in recent years the safety has improved greatly. I mean, you look at some crashes that have occurred over the last few years that, honestly, if it happened 10, maybe 15 years ago, the driver would be injured severely, and in these days they could get out with basically no issues. I mean, you look at, for example, Austin Dillon's crash at Daytona back in 2015, or even Kyle Larson's at that track 2 years earlier. I mean, I would have hated to have seen those crashes happen, like I said, 10, 20 years earlier.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why it's great that we live in a different time. I mean, technology is going to continue to improve, and we're all the recipients of that, and we have to realize how far we've come, but also realize that it's it's not an automatic pass, pass go. It's not automatic out of jail. There's still consequences to hit a wall at 200 miles an hour. It's just the laws of physics, and I don't know if that'll ever change completely. You can't erase the laws of physics. It's just you're along for the ride when all that mass, all that weight stops suddenly. There's only so much you can do to protect the occupant in the vehicle. But I don't know. Things are going to continue to improve, and we'll see where things go.
Yeah, hopefully things will continue to improve for the better. Now, Austin, once again, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day to do this interview, and I certainly wish you the best of luck in your future races.
Well, thanks again for having me on, and really appreciated, talking to you and answering your questions. But I thought it was really cool that some folks from Twitter were able to ask questions, and hopefully we answered most of them. And social media, I know you have a pretty cool social media following as well, and I continue to try to grow mine every day. Sometimes it seems like it's hard. Sometimes it seems like it's really hard work, just kind of updating the content and pictures and videos. And I know you do a lot of stuff, a lot of racing history, and it can be a lot of work, but I really enjoy interacting with people on social media. So if anybody's listening, they can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Austin Theriault. Basically try to keep it pretty simple. So yeah, find me on there, and be happy to interact with more people.
Once again, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again, and have a great night.
You too.